to this. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I am Narfunda Ross. I am with Team WHIP, and WHIP stands for Working to Help Those in Pink. And this year, our focus is savoring the T, and the T stands for Thriving, Essentials, and Attributes. And an essential is having a healthy relationship. Okay. It's hard for us to thrive when we are unhealthy, physically, when we are unhealthy mentally, and when we're unhealthy emotionally. It is hard for us to thrive. And when I say us, I'm not just talking about breast cancer survivors, I'm talking about the human as a whole. It is hard to thrive when you are unhealthy. So tonight we have our guest, Julian White. He's going to introduce himself, but the little bit that I do know, he's with Auburn University. He's an intern, and he's sometime here in the Valley area at the Circle of Care. But I'm going to let him tell you about himself. But Working to Help Those in Pink is a nonprofit organization specifying to help the breast health community. We were established in 2015. We partnered with Auburn University Gene Machine in 2016, and we've also partnered with Forge Breast Cancer Surviving Center out of Birmingham, Alabama. And what we do is we support our survivors and our patients physically, financially, and emotionally, and socially. So this is one of those things. Socially, we are trying to support our breast health community so you can be in the comfort of your own home and you can get some healthy information regarding strengthening your relationship. Now, what does this relationship pertains to? Who does it pertain to? And why does it pertain to? That is why we're here tonight. So we're going to let Mr. Julian White introduce himself, and he's going to go into his presentation. We are thankful that he's able to join us tonight after a long day of work and then also doing what he does best. And we are just excited to have him. If you have any questions, you can place them in the chat. I'm trying to multitask and I'll try to read them and ask them aloud. And if you're joining us by Facebook, welcome you all. We thank you all for joining us via Facebook. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them under the live chat feed as well. Once again, if you so happen to miss this, or if you want to go back and hear something that he said that you thought you quite didn't get, this will be placed on Team WHIP Alabama YouTube channel by Wednesday. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Julian White. Thank you all. And make sure that your phones or your devices are on mute.
All right. Well, thank you, Narfunda, for setting this up and organizing it. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to members around the community about a service that I think may be really, really helpful to address some of the issues that, individuals, couples, families may be experiencing. So again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come and present some of the things that I've learned as my time as a marriage and family therapy intern. So again, I am Julian White. I graduated from Auburn in 2023 with my bachelor's degree in human development and family science. And then a week after graduation, I started my master's program in marriage and family therapy. And so I've been doing that since August 2023. I am a current second year student. I'll be graduating with my master's in science in August. So not much longer to go, but right now I'm just really focused on getting all my hours done with seeing clients. And it's been a really interesting experience since starting to see clients last February. So grateful to have this experience, especially being able to get out in the community and present some of these resources, because it's, I think, really necessary to strengthen these relationships that everyone goes through throughout their life. So to keep it going, I do have a few objectives for this presentation. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to better understand the role of marriage and family therapists and how they address health-related challenges. We'll explore a little bit how breast cancer affects mental health and close relationships. And at the end, I'll have a little bit of information on how to find MFT services, and I'll also provide some contact information for myself if you would like to set up services with me in the incoming future. So to start, I thought I'd ask a few questions to have everybody just kind of in the mindset of therapy and the things that therapy may address. So if you've ever experienced stress and anxiety or depression, trauma, grief or loss, if you've experienced communication breakdowns in some of your romantic relationships, or if you've had difficulties related to intimacy and sexual functioning, marriage and family therapy may be something that you'd be interested in signing up for or just finding more information about. So to start with what marriage and family therapy actually is, marriage and family therapy aims to help people improve their relationships with the people around them. So uh, marriage and family therapists really believe in the importance of strong, healthy relationships, just to help you get through anything that you're going through within life. But we do know that uh, these family dynamics, sometimes you have maybe a really difficult communication pattern, or you've had your own individual experiences that really affect how you function in these relationships. So we usually work with individuals, couples, and families to resolve conflict, strengthen their connections, and develop healthier ways of communicating, collaborating, interacting with one another. And so whenever you come in for a session, our goal throughout the entire process is create a supportive and understanding environment where everyone can grow and heal together. So again, MFTs believe in a systemic approach. So basically, that just means that we take a look at every aspect of your relationship, every aspect of your individual being. So we look at social context, cultural context, emotional context, economic, and more. We really believe that as you go through these relationships, all these things have a really important role to play. And then here it says each member in the system has a role to play. So we also believe that change occurs whenever as an entire system can be changed. And so a system can consist of, your immediate family, extended family, your church community, work, coworkers, healthcare professionals, all kinds of things like this. So we believe that change can occur as you make the changes for the broader system, not with just the one person. And so whenever you come in for sessions, uh, we're not looking to just look at what's going on with the individual. If we're looking at issues pertaining to relationships or families, then we're going to want to try and get everybody that's part of that relationship in for the session. And so these are just a few reasons why you may come to therapy. At this point in time, I've seen most of these things. I've especially seen an increase in couples coming in to talk about, communication breakdown, or maybe they're having difficulties with intimacy and sex. For individuals, I've seen quite a few individuals struggling with life transition. So maybe they've gone through a divorce and they're not really sure how to cope with that, or maybe in the case of a mother who has dedicated most of her life to caring for her children, and now that the children are older and maybe she's going through a divorce, finding identity and figuring out what it is that she wants out of life. I've seen that quite a few times throughout my time. And then with families, managing blended family dynamics and processing grief. As for the family dynamics, you maybe have um, a stepchild that's a part of the family, or you have someone that's been fostered. Really understanding, the challenges that come with that, and then with grief and loss, losing a family member. That's been one that I've seen throughout most of my time as a marriage and family therapy intern. So these are pretty common reasons. If you're experiencing anything like this, just know that you're not experiencing it alone, and there are resources available to help you cope with this better.
Julian, I have a question.
Mhm.
So we're talking about therapy, and I saw that pertaining, we're just going to say family. So if you are having um, some stress within your relationship, when do you suggest that we come to see you? When should we schedule an appointment? When we first notice it, or should we try to work things out ourselves, and if it don't get any better, then come to you all? When do you suggest to seek therapy?
I think it's really different case by case. Different clients are going to have different resources available, different skills available to them. So, there's not maybe uh, one time that I'd say like you have to come in. But oftentimes I'll see clients who they've been trying to address these things for a long, long time. I've had couples who have had conflict issues for most of their relationship, and they're just coming in, right before they're talking about ending the relationship. And so I'd say, maybe give it some time, try and see if you can work with your system to address these things. And if it doesn't work, then maybe therapy can be an extra support that you have. But I wouldn't say wait until the very last minute. Definitely don't do that. But yeah.
All right, thank you.
So on our flyer, there's a few different things such as anger management, relationship distress, and grief and loss. So I do want to highlight those a little bit. For anger management, we know that anger management, or MFTs know that anger management is not a primary emotion. It typically stems from things like fear or pain or sadness. And anger is typically just the easiest thing to turn to whenever you're experiencing some of these more intense emotions. And so when it comes to anger management, we're trying to do a lot of things to help manage that stress, manage that pain, manage that fear a bit better. And so this first one, progressive muscle relaxation, that's an easy one that you can do. And there are plenty of YouTube videos you can find online that can kind of walk you through some of these things. But uh, basically, you focus on different parts of your body and you tense them for a certain amount of time and you work your way. I've done with clients where we work our way from the toes all the way to the top of the head. So we kind of work each area, each muscle one by one, and tensing that. And the way that it works is as you tense those muscles, it releases a hormone in your brain. It's the same kind of hormone that's released whenever you exercise. You get a little bit of a dopamine hit, and it can help also reduce some cortisol, their stress hormone, as you do this. Um, the next few are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of these can be done through journaling. And so, with some of my clients who have difficulties managing anger or other emotions, I assign them journaling practices. So maybe they'll journal once or twice a week, and it gives them an opportunity to reflect on their experiences, reflect on what's triggered the emotions that they're experiencing, and then how that emotion impacts their behavior. Because it's really just a cycle. You have some kind of stimuli, you have some kind of trigger, and then you have an emotion that comes up because of that, and then it influences your behavior. And so if we can start to build an awareness of these things, and this doesn't just pertain to anger, but anxiety or sadness, anything that comes up for you, being able to identify the triggers and behavioral patterns there can work wonders into understanding, okay, these are just some of the ways that I can maybe manage it a little bit better. And then finally, mindfulness meditation. That's one that can work with literally any ailment, any emotion that you're experiencing. Um, I've found that particularly with anxiety, often clients will say that they're always thinking ahead to what's coming next, what's happening next, and they're focused on, the next moment. But there's a lack of focus on what's going on in the current moment. So a lot of what mindfulness meditation is trying to do is to help steal the mind a little bit, maybe bring the thoughts to the present, and teach you how to manage the thoughts a little bit easier, and really ground yourself in that present moment. Now, for relationship distress, there are, this is not an exhaustive list. There are so many things that can create distress and dysfunction within a relationship. These are some of the ones that I've seen quite often, and oftentimes it's multiple of these reasons. One that I see quite frequently are the frequent communication breakdowns. I just had a client call last week to set up sessions saying that, I feel like we speak two different languages. I'm not hearing what you're saying and you're not hearing what I'm saying. Oftentimes it's just, you know, people experiencing stress or pain, and they're wanting to be heard by their partner, but maybe their partner is experiencing the same kind of thing. Maybe they're experiencing their own stress. Maybe they're experiencing their own pain. So, in an effort to get your partner to see, they're ignoring or you're ignoring what they're going through as well. You just want that validation for yourself. And so that can lead to some tension and some conflict. And then it leads to that resentment down there. If you're not being listened to, if you're not being validated, if you're not being understood, then that's where resentment can really start to take shape and really spell, doom for that relationship. Um, I've seen uh, communication breakdowns about finances and maybe each partner on two different pages, and one partner has one lifestyle that they want to satisfy, and the other partner maybe has a different one, and that can really be a huge source of a stress for the relationship. Um, I forgot to include it, but children. Oftentimes, what I'll see with my couples is whenever kids are introduced and they have maybe aging parents and there's a work stress and there's all these things that are going on that are really getting in the way of their friendship. That's
Mhm.
usually the first thing that goes, it's not a priority at that point anymore. You have all these other responsibilities, so it's really hard to nurture that friendship that started the relationship in the first place. And then finally, an imbalance of power dynamics. Oftentimes, what I see is whenever conflict and tension has been going on for a long, long time, usually one partner is just kind of accepted that that's what's going to happen. And so to avoid any further tension or conflict, they just kind of put themselves at like a one down level. And so one partner typically, dominates in a specific area, and it's really hard to um, get that balance back in order. And so that can be a cause for some significant distress within the relationship.
So that's very unhealthy.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Very unhealthy. There are definitely going to be areas where, if we have open communication and we have established, roles, and we've established boundaries and things like that, then that's whenever we are feeling a little bit more healthy about the dynamics. But if there's just, a lack of communication and one partner is dominating the other partner, then that's when we kind of get into some dangerous territory.
So let me ask you this, and I may be asking this too early. And you're talking about clients that come to see you. Do you prefer that the two or the three or how many of involved come at the same time to see you, or do you prefer that they come individually and then collectively after you've probably gotten to a point where you think you can have them all in the same room?
Hmm. If we can start with everybody from session one, that would be the best. Just to establish that relationship with everybody that's going to be involved in therapy. Oftentimes, what may happen is, maybe I'll see someone as an individual, and I'll see them for a certain amount of sessions, and then maybe they want to transition into some family therapy or some couples therapy. What is a concern is that I have that relationship with that individual client, and I can't maintain a neutral kind of stance if the another person comes in. And so what I always tell my clients is I'm not, especially couples and families, I'm not, this person's therapist, and I'm not this person's therapist. I'm the therapist for the relationship, for that dynamic.
Okay.
And so we're trying to maintain that kind of neutral stance. And there may be times where I'm seeing a couple, and then there's one session where I'm just seeing one partner, and the other session is for the other partner. That's something that we do. That's something that is discussed with both partners present. So it's not, it's just sprung on them, and they're just kind of uh, waiting to see what the fallout's going to be with that. No, we're very transparent with what that process looks like.
Okay. Thank you.
And so ways to address relationship distresses. In session, we'll practice new communication skills. And the first one here is a really, I think, important one. It's active listening. Oftentimes, what I'll see, especially conflict-heavy couples, is that maybe one partner is expressing one thing, and then the other partner is queuing up a response in there. They're not even listening. They're just, trying to get their point across. And
Don't talk
so
about us women now.
they're really just trying to, or this activity is really just trying to get each partner in the habit of really paying attention to what someone is saying, and then reflecting back to what they're saying, validating any kind of emotions that they're expressing. Because what I often see is, maybe someone is saying something and there's an emotion underneath it, but maybe they don't feel the most comfortable expressing that emotion. And so they have to get it across one way or the other, and maybe it's not the clearest way. And if that emotion is ignored or invalidated, then that can lead to some conflict, and that can lead to further communication breakdowns. And once we get to, that arena, then there's no active listening. No one's getting empathy or support or validation. Um, and so then also with this conflict management, I've seen plenty of times where a couple is experiencing a conflict, and it gets to a point to where emotions are heightened. And once you get to that level, there's no logic being being thrown out in those conversations. And the literature suggests, whenever you're operating with your emotional brain, your brain, the logic center of your brain is just turned off and is not a part of that conversation. And so whenever we try to do conflict management, a lot of times we're just, you know, practicing an awareness of what are some of the triggers for you in that conversation or interaction. And then whenever you notice yourself start to get really frustrated or really angry or really heated or really just any kind of emotion, then you take a self timeout. So you're not telling your partner, hey, I think you're getting too emotional. You need to take a time out. No, I think I'm getting too frustrated right now and I can't really have this conversation. Let's take a 15-minute break and then we come back to
Mhm.
that conversation.
Now, this
And that
pertains to children as well, correct?
mhm,
Between
any relationship, it can be parent, spouse and a spouse or a parent and a child, but making it clear like, hey, I think I need a break from this right now, but we'll come back to it, and then establish, maybe we'll come back in 15 minutes, maybe we'll come back in an hour. I've had couples who said that they needed 4 hours apart to have that conversation, and then once they had that time apart, and then they came back, they had a much better outcome than what it would have been had they not learned that kind of skill to use.
Let me ask you this
Um,
question.
mhm,
What
yeah.
about work relationships? Do you have any coworkers that may come to you with needing help addressing relationships at work?
I mean, like I said, with any kind of relationship, whether it's boss employee or coworker, anything, being able to utilize some of these interventions, and like I said before, with the conflict management, the key part is coming back to the conversation. Because if we just like, hey, I can't have this conversation right now, and then we never have it, then emotions are going invalidated, they're getting ignored, and then you see that, you feel that, and it only intensifies that emotion. It only intensifies the conflict, and can even lead to resentment if it's repeated pattern.
Okay, thank you.
Um, So the next point, utilizing behavioral interventions. Like I said, oftentimes what I see is as life becomes stressful, as all these responsibilities start to pile up, that couple relationship, that friendship, it takes a back seat. And so you're not spending time with each other and you're not doing the things that you enjoy. And so I'll often, assign clients to plan a date together. Because not only does that foster communication and collaboration, but it's also just a good time for y'all to have one-on-one time away from the kids or away from other family or away from all the things that are deterring you from having that together. And then shared activities, quality time. That's whenever y'all just, identify a date night or you want to go see a movie or something like that together. A shared activity. A perfect one would be cooking. One partner may be tasked with prepping the vegetables, and the other partner may be tasked with doing, the meat, something like that. But something that, you can each have tasks associated with it, but it's for one shared goal. And so having those can foster connection, they can even foster intimacy. And so I really lean on that a lot with a lot of my couples and families. And then finally, identifying desired versus undesired patterns of interaction. So often at the start of therapy, I will try to instigate just a little bit just to see what that dynamic is like, and then point it out as it's happening. Oftentimes, whenever we get stuck in these cycles of conflict, we don't even really know it's happening. We just know that, okay, well, here we go again. We're not aware of the lead up to it. We're not aware of, if you make this little tweak here, maybe it'll end differently. So I've had plenty of sessions where the client they'll fall into some conflict in the session, and then I slow it down, I pause it for a minute, and then I point it out, and they're like, "Whoa, we didn't even think of it like that before, or we never even saw it, and you were able to pick it out just like that." And so having, a third party or having an unbiased, neutral perspective can be really helpful in identifying like, okay, these are the things that we're doing that maybe we really don't want to be doing. And then the other side of that is identifying what it is that you would like to be. Because if you can envision that interaction, if you can envision that dynamic, it'll be a lot easier to achieve that than just like, okay, well, we know we don't want to be doing this. Well, what are you going to replace that? And so, yeah, being able to think of the things that y'all would like to be doing, I think is really, really important. And so here we have grief and loss. Now, grief and loss are really um, heavy things to be dealing with on your own. And it can be, an individual dealing with grief or, um, you know, a parent dealing with the loss of a relationship with their child. I've had a client where um, they lost custody of their child and their relationship just really deteriorated. They've been really struggling with for, but it's the fact that this child is alive and they can still go see them, but that relationship is just so strained that it almost feels like it's not there anymore. And so we know that with grief and loss, there are a variety of impacts for your physical well-being, emotional well-being, all the things. And so here we have, fatigue and poor appetite. Usually what accompanies grief and loss are, depression, anxiety, heightened stress. And so we know that that contributes to fatigue and poor appetite. You have, poor appetite that feeds into exhaustion and fatigue. And if you're feeling fatigued, then it could be very possible that you're not even getting out of bed to go and eat something.
Wow.
And then same thing with the depression, not having the will or energy, or desire to do any of these things. And then I'm sure y'all have heard of the stages of grief, and one of those is anger. Grief can create a lot of anger, at yourself. Maybe you are experiencing bargaining and you're like, well, I could have done this differently. Now I'm angry at myself that I didn't do that. Or guilt. I've had clients where the relationship with the deceased or the person that they lost, it was not what they wanted, or they treated that person poorly, and then they pass and they can't uh, uh,
Cope with it.
uh, yeah, they can't make that up. They can't change that.
Right.
And so there's maybe some guilt there. And then with the social, some people may experience closer relationships. They may be able to find that closer support, while others they maybe experience a bit of withdrawal, or they experience strained relationships. Maybe the person that they lost was keeping that system together. And now that that person's gone, there's not a lot keeping that system together. And then again, shifts in family dynamics. Maybe the person that you lost was um, uh, a provider for the family financially, emotionally, and now that that role is vacant, other people may have to fill that role, or maybe that role can't be filled. And so that has a wealth of impacts, especially on the family dynamics.
You know what? I didn't think about that earlier. I see when you're saying shifts in family dynamics. I didn't think about it because in most, I'm not gonna say most, in some households, um, where the male figure is the leading provider, and if the male figure may lose his job or change jobs, and they're away from home sometimes, and it cuts into it. Um, that is a part of grief, and you better, how can we deal with that?
I think if you lose that figure, then it is a bit more difficult to try and fill that role. Just, there's not going to be an exact fit. And then also, whenever you're grieving that figure and roles have to shift, now you're grieving the loss of your role. Maybe you have to change things about what you do. Maybe you have to I've seen with especially whenever it is a um, figure that is a provider. Maybe a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old has to step up, and maybe they have to lose a little bit of that innocence. Maybe they have to lose a little bit of that childhood because they need to be a financial provider for that system. And so processing that, processing, you know, what that loss means, not only of the person that's left, but also what you lose just as an individual within that system. And so there are a lot of there are a few different interventions I've tried. Talk therapy is one, being able to um, express the emotion that is tied to that. There's an empty chair intervention, and so usually this is pretty deep into uh, the therapeutic process, but usually I'll have the client speak to the person that they lost. Now, in some cases, it could be the person that passed away. In other cases, it may be their younger self. What did that person lose to get to where you are now? But being able to externalize those emotions rather than keep them inside, because then that can lead to the anger, that can lead to depression, that can lead to resentment and all of these things. So I think that externalizing it can be a really great help.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And yeah, I had to include a little bit about breast cancer just because I know what this organization stands for. And so a little bit that I found online, I found a few studies that had some really interesting statistics. And so around 30% of breast cancer patients experience depression, while around 40, I think it was like 42, experience anxiety. So those are some pretty significant numbers. Those are not anything to just kind of look over or ignore. It's really significant that um, and I think this was a global study. One of these was a global study. So 30% of the global population of breast cancer patients experience these things. And so I think it's really important that these services are available and people are aware of what they can be doing to help address some of these mental health concerns. And then this next study, the 2015 study, um, found that a significant number of women, and I also want to add that I think that um, a third of their African American respondents, a third of them had an even higher risk of combined anxiety and depression. So, and then there's the increased fatality rates with these things, and it's really significant that these things are a part of the literature, but services are still a little bit more difficult to find these days, and there are financial considerations and there's location, and I'll talk about it in a later slide. But I did some quick looking around, and there weren't very many therapists that I've found in the Chambers County area that were under $100 for a session. And so we know that there's still barriers to access. We know there's still social and cultural ideas about what therapy is and how it can help. And so I think it's really a great opportunity, and I'm really appreciative that I'm able to do these kinds of things so that I can help. If I can help reduce the stigma for one person and get them in for therapy, then I've done my job. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
And so, for those who are just joining us, we're talking with, when I say we, Team Whip, we're talking with Julian White, who's with Auburn University Marriage and Family Therapy. And as most of you all know, we've had significant of medical professions to leave the area, and we have limited resources right here in Chambers County. But he is with the Circle of Care as well. He has an office there, satellite office in the Circle of Care building in the medical park. And so we don't have to drive for these services. He's here locally. And it's such a blessing to have him to be able to assist us with this. As he said, our mental health, dealing with breast cancer, not just breast cancer, but any type of cancer. And that's what we're talking about tonight is minding healthy relationships. And I have been floored. Okay, I'm going to stop interrupting you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And then there are other conditions that kind of come with that. So substance use disorders, um, we usually see a pretty high number in that, especially when it comes to addressing any kind of health concern. Like you just said, there's not very many resources like this available in the area, and if it is available, it may be a little bit too expensive for some people. And so we usually see substance use rise to address, any kind of these concerns. So, we've seen it address, physical ailments. We've seen it address mental health and anxiety and depression. And, you get to feel that relief for, some time. But, I'm in an addictions class right now. And as I'm learning, you use these substances and you have that quick relief, but as soon as that's gone, then these things come back. The pain comes back, the depression comes back. And so then what do? You turn around and you use again. And so it creates a really vicious cycle. And so rather than being able to, some people just do not have access to this kind of thing. And so, I completely understand if they turn to different substances, just because that's what they have to do to survive. And then there's also sleep disorders that come with this. We mentioned fatigue. There is sexual dysfunction, and then also poor body image. And so this is particularly speaking to those who maybe have experienced hair loss, or maybe they've gotten a mastectomy, anything like this that can really impact how you view yourself we know that this is pretty prevalent within the breast cancer patient and survivor community.
Well, I'm going to jump on real quick one more
Yeah.
time. Uh, and I'm reading this where you're talking about the poor body image and identity issues. I am a 16-year breast cancer survivor, and back in 2008, when I was diagnosed and I was going through my journey, I experienced the hair loss. My hair was gone for 6.5 months. The body image, it changed drastically because I had a double mastectomy. And that is something that well, not throws, it weighs on your mental health. And that part about the sexual dysfunction. And there's sometimes some things we don't discuss, but this is a part of a healthy relationship. And so if it's unhealthy, then there is some distress in the relationship. And I'm reading this now. If I had known this probably back in 2008, and there are a lot of women who will opt out of having the mastectomy, the double mastectomy, even chemo, in fear of it putting stress on their relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a really great observation. I appreciate that. The self-disclosure of that because we do know that that's a pretty common experience. And um, with the poor body image, I'll get into the sexual and intimate aspect of the relationship. I think next. Yeah. Okay. No, we'll get there in a minute. But these are just some of the things that we'll do to address um, um, anything that may be impacting breast cancer patients and survivors. So with narrative therapy, that one is really about redefining what your story is as a breast cancer patient or survivor. And so, really empowering interventions that are tied to this. Cognitive behavioral therapy, that's one that can really help. It's centered around restructuring some thoughts that you may have about, yourself, your body image, your health experience, things like that. Mindfulness-based stress reduction. So that's the mindfulness activities or progressive muscle relaxation, and of course, couples and family therapy, because we know that this doesn't just affect the person going through it, but they are, dependents or they have people who depend on them. And so really important that these people, these family members and partners can get involved in the process, because while maybe they're supporting the breast cancer patients and survivors, then that's great and all, but they also have their own things that they may be experiencing as it pertains to anxiety about the future and the uncertainty that may be there when it comes to diagnosis. And then here, breast cancer and relationships. So I included a few of these, particularly sexual intimacy, because um, as I was just kind of like poking around and reading up on how breast cancer is impactful on relationships, sexual intimacy was one of the ones that came up every single time. And so we know that, poor body image really plays a role in that. If you're not feeling yourself, if you're not feeling, that desire there, if you're not feeling, um, um, I guess attractive. Yeah, if you're not feeling that, then you're not gonna have that desire there. We know that with these things, there's the emotional disconnection because maybe there's fear and anxiety of what the future may bring. So maybe there is a bit of distance there to help prepare for what may be the worst possible outcome. When it comes to chemotherapy, maybe there's fatigue involved, pain and discomfort, and then role dynamics may change. If your caregiver is your part or your partner is your caregiver, maybe in recovery or after a certain amount of time and you're not affected by the cancer anymore, it may be a bit more difficult for them to transition back into a romantic role. And so we know that these things really play a big role. Um, I think that's most of it. And then parenting challenges. So as family roles shift, whenever you have adolescents and you have younger children, then it may be really difficult to have some of these conversations if there's a lot of fear and anxiety attached to these things, or if roles had to change and a child may have had to uh, take on more of a active role in, you know, bringing in finances or caretaking. Maybe there is some resentment there because there is maybe a loss of what's the word? Innocence there as well. Or, they had to give up some of the things that they were doing to become a caretaker. So all of these things, we want to validate that, but we also know that it can create some tension and conflict. And whenever emotions are high, it may be really hard to work through that tension and conflict. So we do think that being in the therapeutic space, being in that environment can help foster some really important conversations and discussions that may not happen elsewhere. And some of the things to address this sexual intimacy, I've been working with several couples. They're not uh, uh, impacted by breast cancer, but there are issues of sexual dysfunction that have come up. And so I know that with some of these couples, there's this expectation of how sex should be and what intimacy should be. But we know that if you introduce any kind of sexual dysfunction or issues with intimacy, there has to be some kind of shift because with some of these couples, the expectation is that sex should be this one way. And since it isn't, since we can't do it that one way, then we're not sexual or we're not intimate with one another. So a lot of my work has been focused on fostering non-sexual intimacy and getting people to really define, what does intimacy look like for you within your relationship.
Mm.
And then also if sexual intercourse is something that they can do or they're interested in, then you know how can we work back up to that point? Or if that's something that we can't do, what are some alternatives to that? I think a lot of the couples I've worked with have expressed that for the longest time, sex should end with, sexual intercourse, penetration, and orgasm. And that's all that's expected every single time. And so if that can't happen or it doesn't happen, then they're just not sexual and intimate, and that part of their relationship fails. And I appreciate what you said about Narfunda, what you said about you know having that aspect of the relationship be healthy because it is really important that that is a healthy aspect of the relationship. That is the premier way to foster emotional connection with a lot of different couples. And so if that is something that it shifts because of a diagnosis or anything medical, then we've got to, be a little bit flexible and find alternative ways to help foster that connection. Okay, so we've gone through what therapy is, we've gone through some of the things that it addresses. Now you're in, a space where you're like, okay, I think therapy is definitely something that I am interested in setting up. First thing first is really look in your area and see what's available and identifying that therapist niche. And so when we say niche, each therapist is going to have a different thing that they're really passionate about. So some therapists may market themselves as, strictly couples and relationships. Other therapists may be interested in PTSD or, OCD or any kind of disorder that may come up. Or therapists may use a certain treatment modality. Maybe they'll do cognitive behavioral therapy, or maybe their focus is on EMDR, I think it's eye desensitization and movement reaction, something like that. But that one's really focused on trauma and processing some of these memories that may be locked away. I included these three therapy databases, so Psychology Today, Therapy Den, and Good Therapy. All of these are websites and things that therapists can register for, and it has on their information, what they do, where they're located, so we can show you. who is available in the nearby area. Here, prices may vary based on location and services offered. So I know that, here I say the therapists in the Lee County Chambers County area range from about $90 a session to 150. I know that some therapists, we had a class last summer where we talked to a bunch of different therapists. There was a therapist in California that was charging $500 a session. And so yeah, it can get really, really expensive. It can get really, really expensive. And then based on what's being offered, that plays a role as well. And so, you know, being able to use these resources and being able to find, what fits your price point, I think is really, really a great tool to have. And then also identifying if you want to do teletherapy or in-person services. And so teletherapy, it's, it's different, but it's not. You're doing the same things, but obviously you're not in the same room with the therapist or the client. And so the dynamic can be a little bit different. I've done teletherapy, more and more as the program has gone on, and I can definitely see the benefits in there. It's convenient. You don't have to leave the house. But I've also seen that if you're in a space that you're comfortable in,
Hmm.
then it's going to be really hard to, do the uncomfortable things in therapy. And what I say about therapy is that this is a place to be uncomfortable because we've been comfortable for a long time and we know that that's not working right now. And so we gonna have to, branch out and be uncomfortable with that.
So what they say, get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes, definitely.
So I have a question, and I don't know if you're
Mhm.
going to talk about this in the next slide or not. Okay, you got the therapist in Lee Chambers County's area is about 90 to $150. Are you going to share what you all's prices are, and
Yeah. Yes,
is
that's in the
it
next slide.
cheaper teletherapy cheaper than in person, or is it still
Mhm.
the same?
I've seen that with teletherapy, it's typically about the same. It doesn't um reduce the cost of it. At least from what I've seen, I've not heard of any therapists doing a reduced price just for doing teletherapy. Um, Here, I have a little bit of information about what the Auburn University Marriage and Family Therapy Center offers. So here you'll see that our session fees are $60, or is $60, I should say. And we offer a sliding scale. So typically in the phone call, we'll ask the client, we'll tell them what the typical session fee is. And if they're interested in the sliding scale, they can tell us what their annual household income is, and based on that, they may have their session reduced, down to $20. So the most you ever pay is $60, and then there are some cases where you can go down to as low as $20 a session. And so we can do that because the AUMFT Center is a training center for graduate students. So I am not a fully licensed therapist. However, I do get weekly supervision from multiple supervisors discussing the case and seeing, how we can make the sessions the most beneficial for our clients. I do have multiple placement sites, so I'm at uh, Circle of Care in Valley 3 days out the week, and then the other 2 days, I think I have sessions and in Auburn 4 days a week or 3 days a week. And so I split my time between the two. So if it's easier for you to come to see me in Valley, you can definitely do that. If it's easier for you to go to Auburn, we can do that as well. And so I've included the email address and the phone number for the Auburn office. Whenever the number next to Circle of Care, that's my personal office number. So if you want to come and see me in Valley, call that number, and I can try and get you scheduled as soon as I can. I do have, as of today, I think I only have a few more slots available. And so if you're wanting to get in as soon as possible, please give me a call this week and we can get you set up with an intake session as soon as we can. And I think, okay, and then this part right here, I wanted to make sure everybody knew what to expect going in. And so in the previous slide, it said that sessions typically last from 8 to 20 sessions. The literature suggests that once you hit 20 sessions, treat or progress usually tends to taper off. And so probably around the 20th session, we'll have a conversation about if therapy has been helpful, if it's not been helpful, what are some alternatives that we can do? Maybe I can refer you out. There have been some cases where it's gone over 20 sessions. That's usually a conversation that I'll have with my supervisor and the client, and then we'll just see what works best for the client. As for what to expect from treatment, the first few sessions are typically centered around gathering key information and building rapport with the client. We want this to be a space where you can share and feel comfortable sharing the things that you experience and the things that are kind of going on. And so we're very we place a really strong emphasis on building rapport and maintaining that rapport. And if ruptures happen and that therapeutic relationship is in jeopardy, then we do what we can to help salvage that and repair it. And then as treatment goes on, usually the second session, we identify what are some of our goals for therapy. And so what's really important about marriage and family therapy is that it's goal oriented. I have had clients come in and they want someone to, listen and talk about problem of the week type stuff, what's going on this week and vent. And there's definitely space for that. I always hold space for clients to discuss the things that are really affecting them, that day or that week. But we also want this to be productive, and we also want to set some clear and concise goals. And so every session can't be, you come in and talk about what's bothering you that week and then session over. We have to do some real, some work there. And sometimes it's a bit difficult, but like we said, you have to be uncomfortable in this space to, create lasting change that you want to see. So we'll spend some time clarifying why the client wants to be in therapy or needs to be in therapy, and then create a treatment plan, tailored to what they need. And so we'll identify different interventions to use throughout it. And then it's also really crucial that the client is active in their engagement. So it only works if the client is working with us. And so I always tell my clients whenever I first start seeing them, uh, there are 268 hours in a week, and I only see you for one of those. And so those other 267, you gotta you gotta put in the work yourself, and you have to do these things. Otherwise, therapy is just gonna be me telling you like, hey, maybe try this, and then you coming in saying, well, I didn't do it, and no changes happen. And we know who's responsible for the change at the end of the day. All we can do as a therapist is, you know, provide that space to express the emotion, identify some things that you can do, and then, or as it pertains to relationship, identify different things you can do, and then you have to put in the effort to do that. And then we're monitoring progress throughout the entire thing. And so oftentimes, every few sessions, I'll check in with my clients, see how they're feeling about, their progress, see how they're feeling about what we're doing. And I encourage them to be as honest as possible. If it's not working, please tell me that so we can make the adjustments and see what we need to do so that it is a productive use of our time. And then it also gives the client an opportunity to reflect on, what they have done, because like I said, it's them doing the work. I'm just sitting there, reflecting or relaying the things that I've learned and providing that space to talk. But they're doing the hard work, and so giving them their flowers and talking to them about the things that they've been doing. And then eventually we'll work towards termination. It's not a it's not expected to be a long-term thing. We're not trying to be in therapy for, the next 5 years or so. There are definitely therapists and other mental health professionals that do that, but for our training clinic, we're only in the program for 2 years, and we only see clients for about a year and a half of that. As I said, I'll be graduating in August, and so we'll be working with my clients, to get them prepared for that. And if they need to continue on, then there'll be another therapist that takes my place, and then they'll have to go through that progress or process of meeting the new therapist and transferring that case. And so, but we do try and work towards achieving all the goals that we set forth at the start of therapy. And that's it for me. Uh, oh, did it change? Uh-oh. Okay, there we go. So yeah, that's it for me. I appreciate the space to share some of these things, and I really hope to see some of you in therapy. If that's something that you're interested in. I have a QR code here. If you pl would please follow that, and there's a brief survey for you to do. Just helps me see what areas I may need to improve in, and helps me get a good idea of if this has been informative and helpful for everyone who's participated. So thanks again for inviting me to do this, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Thank you so much. You may have to send me that QR code via email and I
Okay.
can share it out. And if you're on Facebook Live and you attended the session, if you would just hop in my inbox and say, send me the QR code as well, I'll get it to you because we just don't want to put it out in Facebook and some random person
Mhm.
text survey
Yeah.
us. Julian, this has been very helpful. I know we've done sessions previous dealing with mental health, but I think this was more in depth because this actually talks to us and helps train our vision of what. Okay, Kimberly Tucker said it was a great presentation and information. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. Thank you
It
very
helps
much.
it helps our vision to see what it would be like if we went to therapy. It helps us to see what our relationships, how they could grow, how we could mend them, how we could make them much more healthier if we just attend. A lot of times we think we can work through this ourselves, but then there become that communication breakdown. And then
Hmm.
once we get that communication breakdown, everything else, it just like matriculates throughout, and then it turns into grief, and it
Hmm.
turns into loss. And I mean, when I say loss, not speaking death physically, but death emotionally, so very great information on tonight. I thank you so much for taking time today
Yeah,
and
of
sharing
course.
with us. And like I said, for those who just tuned in, we were talking with Julian White with Auburn University marriage and family therapist therapy. I'm sorry, therapy. And it's just not for couples. He spoke about couples enrichment, things that you could do, some activities that you could do together to kind of foster that relationship back to being healthy. It could be a parent and a child. It could be a boss employee. It could be your coworker. It could be your church going person that you sit with on the pew. Your church members. It could be anybody in your family, just anybody that you have a relationship. This is what we are discussing on tonight. So we thank everybody for attending the session. I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all may have some noise in the background. I do apologize. But we thank everybody for attending the session on tonight. For those who just tuned in, we will be placing this on our YouTube page on Team Whip Alabama. Also, don't forget to take the survey. Screenshot it if you can. If not, let me know and I can get it to your inbox. Julie, can you put up real quick your contact information, and then we are
Yes.
out on this Monday. Okay, this is his contact information. If you can screenshot it, if not, I'm pretty sure we will have a way to send it to you via email. And once again, he has his email address here, which is AUMFT, which is Auburn University Marriage Family Therapy. Did I get that right?
Hmm.
Okay. At auburn.edu, or you could call 334-844-4478. And for the services, his office at the Circle of Care in Valley, because we know how we're limited to our resources here in the Valley area. You can reach him at 334-472-1038. Once again, Julian, we appreciate this time, all this vital information that you have given. Don't forget to take your surveys, and the contact information is there. And we look forward to working with you, and we hope that someone takes advantage of this therapy, okay? And if
Yeah,
anything that Team Whip can do for you, once again, Julian, don't hesitate to reach out to us, okay?
I really appreciate that.
All right, thank you all. Y'all have a great night, and congratulations on your graduation in August.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.